Ever since green-clad hero Link first hee-ya'd his way into the gaming world in the mid-1980s, gamers have been entranced by the world of Hyrule and its classic tale of Chosen One versus evil warlock who is also sometimes a bore for some reason. The games have evolved over the years, continually setting new standards both for each other and the adventure game genre as a whole, but one element that has stood the test of the hero of time is that of the classic and often themed dungeon. Each of these trials, which are generally themselves in a specific themed area home to one of the series' many species, allow Link to prove himself as well as rewarding him with crucial equipment and precious extra hearts. Not all are made equal though, which is why we've gathered a few of the best to showcase for today's list. Always remember, it's dangerous to go alone. Take this list of challenges that exemplify the best the series has to offer so you can be sure to avoid any water temples. I'm Ben from TripleJump, and here are the 10 best Zelda dungeons. Number 10. Snow Peak Ruins, Twilight Princess. That's right, we're starting off this list with a bit of a controversial one, folks. Strap in. Ice levels aren't generally looked upon fondly, mainly because a large chunk of players' time there is split between slipping around on every surface and cursing wildly because they're slipping off every surface. However, Snow Peak Ruins is unlike any of the others to be found in the Zelda series, which makes it a bit more interesting to play around in. This is mainly because most of the dungeons Link explores are abandoned ruins, with only Keeses and Wallmasters and the like taking up residence, but this time around it's a run-down but still used mansion, and the monsters are joined by homeowners Yeto and Yetta. The latter is ill thanks to the Twilight Mirror Shard locked in one of their rooms, so they ask Link for his help in exchange for delicious heart-restoring soup. As players progress through the Icy Palace, they'll still fight monsters, break ice walls, and slip around a fair deal, but like it or not, Snow Peak Ruins is one of the most memorable, unique areas of the whole franchise and is one of the best examples of the game experimenting with its own ideas. Number 9. Thieves' Hideout, A Link Between Worlds. With two notable exceptions, the handheld Zelda titles don't tend to be brought up as much as the others. That doesn't mean they don't have some unique dungeons of their own though, and one of these is the Thieves' Hideout. It takes some work to get here in the first place, as there's a secret password song to access it which Link can only learn by eavesdropping on townsfolk. Once inside, the idea that this is in fact a storehouse for a bunch of thieves really shines through because all of the treasures feel like plundered loot and the place is full of traps to dissuade people from robbing the robbers. Eventually, Link meets up with an imprisoned thief girl, and after freeing her, the two get locked in and are continually ambushed by monsters. At this point, it's a race to the exit, but thankfully the pair can use the traps against the baddies, and between the two of them and the place's many statues, they're able to flip the switches and make their escape. The main reason this hideout doesn't stand out more is that it's relatively small, and technically the whole thing turns into a bit of an escort mission, but it's an interesting little diversion nonetheless. Number 8. Eagle's Tower, Link's Awakening. Despite the series' humble origins, there's really only so much that can be done with a 2D Zelda dungeon. However, the one that used its limitations in the most creative way has to be Eagle's Tower from Link's Awakening. And yes, I'm aware the Switch one means it's technically 3D now too, but it was originally 2D, so just go with me on this point, okay? When Link first enters the tower, it's not actually possible for him to make it to the boss as it stands, and in order to gain access to the higher rooms and eventually the final battle, he has to destroy 4 pillars with a large iron ball, which he'll find conveniently stored in one of the rooms he has access to. Seems like poor planning if you ask me. In any case, once players have managed to take care of all of these, the whole structure of the dungeon changes as the top floor comes slamming down onto the one below it, creating a path that finally leads to the boss fight. This is one of the better bosses of the game, ensuring that from start to finish, Eagle's Tower is one of the most standout 2D Zelda dungeons. Number 7. Ancient Sister, Skyward Sword. Skyward Sword has never been the most popular game in the franchise, with many lamenting the poor motion controls and finding it even more repetitive than other Zelda titles. It definitely does have a few standout moments though, and one of these is the Ancient Cistern. The most striking feature of this particular area is the overall visual design, with the initial upper area coated in gold and full of colour, housing a pond with loads of lotus flowers and a Buddhist-inspired structure in the centre, which makes it seem like it'd be a nice place to explore. Things take a turn once Link enters the lower levels though, with everything going a bit dark and spooky and hordes of terrible creatures suddenly showing up everywhere, some of which even chase him up a rope at one point. The visual design is impressive though, but throw in the fact that the place recreates the Buddhist tale, the spider's thread, and that the vastly different visual styles of the upper and lower areas are parallels for heaven and hell, and you have a truly unique, self-contained story dungeon. The whole thing is so well done that it makes this place, which essentially equates to a water dungeon, much more tolerable than it might have been otherwise. Number 6. Tower of the Gods, Wind Waker. Despite the initial backlash regarding its art style, Wind Waker still has a lot going for it, and our writer isn't just saying that because it's her personal favourite, I swear. While most of the temples don't do anything the series hasn't seen before, the Tower of the Gods is where all this game's unique mechanics come to a head. Serving as the journey's halfway point, this massive tower is the culmination of the 3 temples that came before, because Link has to use the 3 goddess pearls he got in the other dungeons to make the building rise out of the sea. Once inside, he's faced with a trial designed to prove whether he's ready to become a hero. The first thing that players have to get to grips with is the constantly rising and lowering water levels, which create a lot of puzzles in the tower. Link also has to use the strange sentient statues dotted throughout the place in order to progress, and as he ascends the tower, the challenge climbs upwards as well. All this is capped off with one of the more unique boss fights of the game, which ultimately rewards Link with a trip to a familiar location as well as his iconic weapon, making this a truly unforgettable challenge. Number 5. Sandship, Skyward Sword. From one game with sailing to an actual pirate ship now, as we jump back into Skyward Sword and take a look at one of its best dungeons, the Sandship. In order to get to it in the first place, players have to shoot it with a cannon, which will not only make it visible but slow it so they can board properly. Once on board, the Sandship proves to be a masterclass in puzzle solving. The crucial item that Link acquires here is the bow, and once he grabs it, that's when the true fun of the dungeon starts. From then on, players will be using it to shoot the ship's time shift stone as they progress, which not only visually changes the ship from something decrepit into its original opulent state, but means that they'll have to constantly keep in mind what deck they're on and make sure to find a way to shoot up through them to the stone as it's positioned high on the mast. The only downside to this particular portion of the adventure is that the final boss is generally considered to be lackluster, especially considering the dungeon it's placed in, but thankfully the mini-boss more than makes up for it. I mean, there are fewer things cooler than a robot pirate, let's be honest. Number 4. Arbiter's Grounds, Twilight Princess. Twilight Princess is overall the darkest in tone of the Zelda games, and the place where this truly comes into play is in the atmospheric and downright creepy Arbiter's Grounds. This huge desert structure was originally a prison which housed the most ruthless of Hyrule's criminals while they awaited either execution or exile, and now seems to be cursed with its part Colosseum, part Egyptian tomb-like structure harboring all sorts of undead, or should I say, re-dead, enemies. This is the first dungeon where Link can change into a wolf at will, which he'll have to do in order to hunt down 4 mischievous Poes using his wolfy sense of smell. The mini-boss utilizes this as well, with players having to use both of Link's forms to defeat it. Finally, the place also ends with what is probably the most memorable boss of the game, a multi-stage fight in a sandpit against the massive skeletal Stall Lord that makes great use of the dungeon's special item, the spinner, by forcing Link to use it for offense, defense, and traversal over the course of the battle. It's a shame that the spinner is practically useless for the rest of the game and hasn't been seen in any of the other titles, but I doubt you'd need it at this point. Number 3. Hyrule Castle, Breath of the Wild. It may have done everything it needed to and more to give the series a new direction, but its open nature and complete lack of linear progression made Breath of the Wild a bit of a weird one to talk about when it comes to dungeons, because they're mostly put by the wayside in favour of the dozens upon dozens of shrines players can explore instead. Hyrule Castle is the primary exception, however, as it is the one place where everyone who finishes the game will go, and one of the best places to approach from a variety of different angles, using any, all, or even none of the items and techniques Link has picked up, depending on how much time the player has wandered and whether they're trying to get minced by Ganon in record time. Want to bypass most of the castle with a combination of climbing and Rivali's Gale? Go for it! Want to make sure you track down every treasure and explore every nook and cranny? You can do that too. The true magic of this version of the series' classic castle is how it manages to replicate the sense of openness the rest of the game has, meaning that no 2 players are likely to tackle it in exactly the same way. Number 2. Forest Temple, Ocarina of Time. Given how beloved Ocarina of Time is, you may be surprised that it's only on here once. True, most of its dungeons are excellent, but of all the temples in all of Hyrule, the Forest Temple is probably the only one that the most people remember the most fondly. This wooded area is the first major location Link explores as a proper adult and makes use of everything he's acquired in his journey so far, as well as amp up the difficulty to let you know that the world means business now and is not the same carefree place it was when Link was a child. Then there's the whole central premise of the area, which tasks the older young lad with chasing down the 4 Poe sisters and using the place's puzzles to twist or untwist corridors and kick the ghosts out of their hiding places. The boss, as well, is one of the most memorable of the whole game, so much so that different iterations have shown up in the other titles as well. Is this choice simply nostalgia taking over? Possibly. However, if you're looking for one of the most iconic dungeons of the series, you can't do much better than this. In fact, it's so good that there's only one dungeon in our eyes that surpasses it, and that's number 1. Stone Tower Temple, Majora's Mask. As unique a game as Majora's Mask is, with its central mechanics of a time loop and painful body transformations, its actual dungeons are, on the whole, not much to write home about. In fact, our writer would go so far as to argue that Great Bay Temple is worse than the much-hated Water Temple in Ocarina of Time. The one major exception to this comes right towards the end of the game in the form of the Stone Tower Temple, and what an exception it is! Stone Tower is itself an intimidating structure, stretching far above Link and forcing him to perform stressful platforming and multiple mask changes to even get to the temple at the top in the first place. Once there, he'll be met with an even more grueling gauntlet, one which uses every single trick he's gained on the way here and throws a whole slew of mini-bosses at him as he makes his way to the final room. Before he can make it there though, the temple throws in some extra twists, literally just for good measure. Though it's not the final dungeon of the game, it's the one that feels the most final thanks to its difficulty and scale, and it truly stands out as one of the best dungeons in the series.